I'm here with Yuwen, who is very much involved in this course, both as a teaching fellow and in the online course, and as well as the head teaching fellow for our college course. She's a student of modern Chinese history, and we've actually asked her here to talk about the classics, the five classics. And you'll see why in a minute when I ask her, well why don't you tell our audience, what is it that you study? What is your research on?
My dissertation research is about the so-called Guoxue, Chinese national learning movement in 20th century China. This movement happened at the moment when thousands of years of political system based on classical and Confucian learning was over, or with the end of the imperial order, and a group of serious Confucian scholars and other like-minded scholars started to think how this whole body of Confucian learning tradition ought to provide important source to the government, to the scholarship and intellectual value to modern China.
And so the classics remain part of that.
Exactly.
Okay.
From their perspective, the classics are living traditions.
Let's start to look at the classics, but first, I think for many people who are watching this, they're not going to really have the knowledge of how a Chinese book works. Now, books appear later in Chinese history, but why don't you begin by explaining how they should look at a Chinese book?
Okay, so for instance, there is a page of the book, and then how should we read? You see columns and characters. For each page, we should move from the right side and to the left. Within each column, we should start from the top to the bottom. The bigger characters are the main text of the classics. And then the smaller characters next to the bigger ones are commentary text, or sometimes sub-commentaries on commentaries.
So it's the reader who punctuates it in this case, right?
Yes.
So
you can
the
show
owner in this case of this book punctuated it.
Yeah, you can show the traces of a reader trying to understand what the meaning of the sentences are.
And so then as we're going through, we have the American or the Western back of the book is the front. And these pages are in fact sewn together. There's actually one page.
It's one page and folded.
Why this arrangement?
This kind of formality has its historical origin from the use of the bamboo strips or the wooden strips very early on. For instance, this is one bamboo strip. The characters carved or written on the bamboo strip. And then let's look at this page again, and you can tell that each page has all those lines. So like a group of bamboo strips lined up and tied together. In here we have some images of the silk scroll with written text. So during Han Dynasty, paper was invented, and it allowed a much cheaper distribution of written text. These replaced, and the Antu printing was invented in, say, Song Dynasty. And then we have new technology in book binding, and then replaced the kind of paper scroll as the kind of unit or media for knowledge. And this printing block, you can tell, you can see the lines, the columns, and the characters, what people in Song Dynasty would use.
If I look through all these five classics, every single one of them is filled with commentary, and there's more commentary than there is classic, right?
Text. Yeah.
Okay. And commentaries, in fact, are a very important vehicle in the Chinese tradition for expressing ideas, for offering new philosophies, by going back, in fact, to the classics and revising them or reinterpreting them in a new way. But what are the classics?
We begin with the classic of songs, or Shi Jing, or classic of odes, the different ways of translating them. So it is anthology of the 305 songs, poems. By and large, they are categorized in three parts. Some of them are the eulogies, or some of them are the hymns. But the main body of those anthologies are actually the so-called Guofeng, airs from the feudal states of Zhou. Scholars have been generally believing that those airs of folk songs from the common people that collected from different feudal states are very, very important medium from which that the politics, the society, or the morality of the rule would be seen.
Sort of the notion of the spontaneous songs of the
Yes.
people, their folk
Yes.
songs, shines a light on rule. Right?
Yes. And the second, 尚书. So we usually translate it as the classics of the documents. The 尚书is a collection of important records of the political actions of the government of the sage kings. And so generally scholars believe that studying this body of text will allow them to understand the deeper or general political and moral principles underlying the rules of the sage kings over the centuries. And this is 礼记, the Book of Rites. It's a very broad collection of essays, generally believed as written by Confucius and his followers, about self-cultivation, about proper behaviors, and also about the right government. And the important point I think we can make based on this book is that the essays altogether sort of tied the personal to the public. The Book of Change.
Or the Book of Changes, right?
So this is so I think it's a very interesting book. It's very interesting and it's still very much used by Chinese people today in their daily life for many different reasons. So first we can see that this is a book of images. It contains 64 different this kind of images, which we really call a hexagram. Yeah. So one hexagram contains stacked lines. Right. Some are broken, and some are solid. So the 64 hexagrams. So scholars believe that the 64 hexagrams, of which each hexagram has a different name, and then they actually came from 8 trigrams. Multiply 8 trigrams, and you got 64.
8 by 8, right?
8 by 8, yeah. And then, so generally, scholars believe that each hexagrams is created originally by the sage kings, who have the ability of observe and observe the natural world and understand the deep mechanism and the principle based on which the cosmos change. And then generally scholars also believe that this kind of vision of the sage kings therefore are able to offer of suggestions or explanations on human affairs as well.
Great.
Many Chinese people still use it for fortune telling. So how it works?
Well, that's complicated.
It's complicated, but generally speaking, when we have questions, when we try to understand our own situations, when we have troubles, when we want to see what are the solutions that we can find, then people usually play with some milfoil stocks, and then play with them according to certain divination method, and then based on the appearance of those stocks, and then milfoil stocks, and then you generate or you get certain hexagrams.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then you look at those.
And you look those
and you try to figure out how that's going to answer the
how
question
that
you
will
bring to
answer
the
my
text,
question,
right?
because each line actually has independent meanings.
Yeah, okay, good. One of the things that's unusual about these hexagrams is that you actually begin at the bottom and count up. So you begin with the bottom line and interpret the overall hexagram, and so on. Yeah.
But there's one thing I want to add. So apart from being a picture, a book of images,
yeah, right.
it also has a lot of words.
Yeah.
So another big part of the Book of Change, or a classic of change, is the so-called 系辞传. Is the appended verbalization, which has its own significance in the whole Chinese intellectual history, because it explained or it philosophized how those hexagrams were created by the sage kings, and why the hexagrams could offer a link between the natural world and human affairs. And then so in this sense, it offers really important vocabularies and references to Chinese scholars to understand how the natural world works and what is the role of human agency played in it.
And our final one, the Spring and Autumn Annals.
春秋. And ostensibly, it is a historical record of the history of the state of Lu. But it is not generally used as simply a historical book, because people generally believe that it was written by Confucius to pass or to let people know about his judgment.
His judgment of political
the judgment
affairs.
on the political affairs. So all the scholars know that the point of studying this book isn't just about learning about historical facts, but they really want to understand what are the general political or moral principles that Confucius had when he wrote the history.
So, the 5 classics with Yu Wen.